The Early History of the Vegan Movement by Donald Watson, taken from the autumn 1965 issue of The Vegan. As first secretary of the Vegan Society and first editor of The Vegan, I have been invited to write some notes on the early days of the society and of the forces that led to its formation. The impending 21st birthday of veganism as an organised movement is an appropriate time to do this, before memories fail and early records are lost. Long before 1944, individuals in the vegetarian movement had experimented with diets free from all foods of animal origin, but these pioneers were few and far between, and no attempt appears to have been made to bring them together. Opposition to their extremism came frequently from their fellow vegetarians, and even so great a writer for the cause as Henry Salt referred divisively to this logic of vegetarianism to the cock and bull arguments used by critics of vegetarianism when they discussed the inconsistencies arising from the use of dairy produce and eggs. However, the 1930s and early 1940s brought events that meant changes in thought and outlook. The movement was being influenced by the forces of evolution. In 1938, the Arnold F. Mills Memorial Lecture was given by Dr. White of the Stonefield Maternity Home, who took as his subject health without dairy produce. Dr. White's partner, Dr. Pink, testified repeatedly in his lectures and writings to the superior condition of babies reared without cow's milk. Orthodox dietitians were beginning to question the long-held belief that proteins from animals were superior to those from plants. The Coventry Vegetarian Society, through the enthusiasm of Frank and Kathleen Mayo, staged a vegetarian supper without dairy produce, which received glowing praise from Frank Wyatt, editor of the Vegetarian News. The Croydon Vegetarian Society carried out almost unanimously the motion that vegetarians should aim at eliminating dairy produce. Burt Jones, in his writings on world and national food supply, illustrated the enormous economic advantages of what he called a vegetal diet. The Leicester Vegetarian Society issued a cookery booklet entitled Vegetarian Recipes Without Dairy Produce, a large edition of which was taken by the London Vegetarian Society. I wrote an article, Should Vegetarians Eat Dairy Produce?, which was printed in the Vegetarian Messenger and later in pamphlet form. In such a changed atmosphere, it was not surprising that many vegetarians were trying diets of greater humanitarian consistency and accepting that butchery and dairy farming were related industries and subsidized each other. To establish an exchange of ideas, an approach was made to the Vegetarian Society asking for a section of the magazine to be devoted to non-dairy vegetarianism, but this request was not granted. In response to a letter I had in the Vegetarian Messenger, 30 readers sent me £1 to cover the cost of the first 4 quarterly issues of the news sheet I had offered to publish, under the title The Vegan News. The first issue appeared in duplicated form of 4 pages in November 1944. 5 issues were published. The last had 12 pages and circulated to more than 500 subscribing members. The response had been far greater than anticipated, and letters poured in at 20 or 30 a day. Many were deeply philosophical and called for long answers. Many did not contain a stamp for the reply, which added to the difficulties of a conscientious objector who for 3 years had been trying to live on a reduced salary of £2 a week. I was working single-handed and frequently never went to bed. As a sideline, I was also secretary of the Leicester Vegetarian Society, a flourishing organisation with regular monthly meetings, and which was preparing to receive the main meetings of the Vegetarian Society in 1945. The severe rationing at the time added further to the conditions which gave the vegan movement a difficult birth. The following paragraph from the first issue of the Vegan News is of historic significance. Wanted, a name. We should all consider carefully that our group, our magazine, and ourselves shall be called non-dairy has become established as a general understood colloquialism, but, like non-lacto, it is too negative. Moreover, it does not imply that we are opposed to the use of eggs as food. We need a name that suggests what we do eat, and if possible, one that conveys the idea that even with all animal foods taboo, nature still offers us a bewildering assortment from which to choose. As this first issue of our periodical had to be named, I have used the title The Vegan News. Should we adopt this, our diet will soon be known as a vegan diet, and we shall aspire to the ranks of vegans. Members' suggestions will be welcomed. More than 100 letters were received commenting on the issue of the Vegan News #1. Concerning the name, these suggestions were made. George Allen Henderson, Al Vega, with All Vegan as a magazine title. Neo-vegetarians, keep the word vegetarian, always referring to the others as lacto-vegetarian until it sticks. Dairy bans, Vitans. Would you like to be known as a benivore, editing the Benivore News? No, neither should I, nor a sanivore. Bowmanga, this one suggests disinfectant, the other something soft, wobbly and very dairy. Non-dairy is non-grammar. I must leave it to more able minds than mine to devise a title I can wear. The word vegan won the day, and it appears to have been a good solution to a difficult problem. It has become internationally accepted and has found a place in some modern dictionaries. Again, quoting from the Vegan News #2, we were encouraged by the following, taken from our correspondence. Logically and humanely, you occupy an unassailable position. If man is to supersede himself and become really man, not merely half animal and half man, he will be compelled to leave the animal half completely behind him, including the leaving of dairy produce out of his diet. Other advances in human understanding, feeling, intuition, and will are necessary to man's emancipation, besides the advance in the humane diet, but the latter is by no means the least important of the superfining methods. Milton Powell. I can do without eggs, milk, and cheese without being any the worse. They have never been at any time an important part of my diet. G. Bernard Shaw. The appearance of your quarterly may prove to be of just as historic value as the meeting in Ramsgate in 1847. W. S. James. The Vegan News #3, published in May 1945, brought the first news that a movement with a democratic constitution was emerging, and that veganism was to develop as a philosophy of life. The following members had consented to serve a temporary committee until a democratic elected committee could be formed: Mr. and Mrs. G. Henderson, Mr. and Mrs. A. Haffenden, Mr. and Mrs. G. Crocker, Mrs. W. Shrigley, Mr. B. Drake, and Mr. P. Spencer. The committee met in London on April 9, 1945, and discussed at length the aims of the movement. It was decided that the society, which had developed from a small group of non-dairy vegetarians, should work for the abolition not only of foods from animals, but of commodities from animals too, especially those originating from slaughterhouses. A vegan trade list was to be prepared. The first annual meeting was held at the Attic Club, High Holborn, London, on December 15, 1945. At that meeting, the society became democratically constituted, and I was able to begin to discharge the great load of work to other shoulders and return to normal life. A fuller account of the early history of the society is contained in the 50 pages of the first 5 issues of the Vegan News. They make interesting reading, for it is not every day that a movement is born which in its general application could revolutionise mankind. Funny, I thought it was about animals only.